the reason I asked Tulani, especially for the song Ascension again, I asked the worship team to bring that back into the cycle before we break for the holidays. There's a reasoning behind it because I felt like we needed to communicate to everybody that although we are preparing to camp in the spirit, and some of us will go camp in the physical. So we've been marching, some of us have fought battles. We've won most of our battles. We're not of those that claim to win every battle, but long term, we never lose a battle. Some battles that we didn't have victory, we'll revisit them when we are better prepared and better equipped. The future is still long, and I'm a big believer in that all has to be redeemed. But so we are for this year, for 2024, it was one of the shorter years in history. I feel like I actually want to go and recheck the calendars, check. Somewhere, some of the days, I think it must be the ANC government, stole some of the days from our government, from our calendar. I did prophesy it would be a very fast year, but man, was it going past quickly. But what a good year. And so as we are preparing to go for a rest, our yearly rest. What do I mean by rest? We try and focus on the simpler things. We try and get away from the hustle and the bustle there's about every year there's this explosion of madness in our world. And we try and sidestep it as much as we can. So we find our way as far as we can. Even if you can't go away all the time, you can do day trips and find nature. And I find that when I'm in God's creation, the pieces of it that's still more like He intended it to be, where there's mountain streams and breezes and the green of trees and the beauty of things unspoiled. I find that there's less of a need to actively pray, because there's a natural worship that rises up from within a person. There's something strong and powerful that comes from coming into agreement with God's perfect creation, the beauty, and especially the order. I think the thing that attracts me most about nature is the order of things. The order of things. That in general, without interference or interruptions from the fallen world, in general, nature will continue to do what God created it to do. And it's amazing how life forms tend to stay true to what they're supposed to be, except for humans. But the rest of nature tends to stay true to what they were created to be. So when you see some video or photo of a tiger lying down with a chicken, it's not beautiful. It's wrong. What's beautiful is when living beings and the created nature remain in the correct order that God created them to be in. Does it make sense? So, why am I saying this? Because we are going to try and find opportunities to quiet our thoughts to not strain against time. A lot of our lives are straining against the passing of time. I still believe that time was introduced in its current form because, together with the fall, because man was going to live forever if we didn't sin, and nothing would have died. So time was just, that's the straining that we sometimes feel. But we can pause. Every year we try and plan, we try and provide so that we can pause the straining against time. And we can go with the slower flow of nature and slower things. And so we try and do it in the simplest possible way. Isn't there something really profound to be able to sit and stare at a fire for an hour and not feel the pressure of having to do anything else? To walk for 2-3 hours through a forest, and you do that because you've pulled yourself out of the yoke of responsibilities. It's a beautiful thing. And so we are preparing to go and do some of it, or as much as it as we can. The reason I asked Sulani to prepare the Ascension song is because we wanted to convey and emphasize the fact that we are not going back to the foot of the mountain to rest. We are spending the last 2-3 weeks to position ourselves way up the mountain, and we have been doing that. Focusing in on covenant brings us into the elevated place of God's ways. Developing and cultivating a heart over the last few weeks, our heart and attitude, a desire of positioning ourselves in God's provision, positioning ourselves in His provision for what we need, not what we want. Very often what we want is not what we need. We identify what we truly need, then God usually provides for it. But we've been cultivating an attitude, a mindset, a heart's desire to simply be positioned within the provision of covenant, the terms and conditions of covenant, with a focus and a mindset of no works, but keeping and fulfilling of His ways. So this morning the time has arrived. I've been planning this ahead for a while, waiting for the right time. The time has come for us to now start to put a stake in the ground. So we worked our way on this little footpath up the mountain. And you don't have to be on the top of the mountain, in the garden, in glory, in His presence, having visions and great supernatural experiences. That's not the place. We will head up that part of the mountain next year. I'm intent and determined for us to head there next year when we come back. But now we are finding ourselves well up the mountain, not in the valley, not at the foot of the mountain. If you are in the valley, then it's time to do a brisk hike up the mountain over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Move your butt. Exactly. Get the high heels off and put your hiking shoes on. So this is not the time of the year to be prancing around in high heels. This is the time of the year to put the hiking shoes on. I like hiking in slops. Most comfortable. But it's not for everyone. I know Marnus, he just takes the shoes off completely. So that's the kind of attitude this time with the attack off the shoes. Find a place next to a stream, green pastures, a nice cave. I don't know about you, that's one of my fantasy things. Safe place. If you needed to imagine a safe place, we don't need psychology in that way anymore, but if you had to have a happy place, that's it. A cave somewhere up the mountain that nobody else can reach. Okay, so we're not going to allow a mindset where we are resting down at the foot of the mountain. That's not what we understand when we talk about resting. We go and rest in a good, elevated place with Him. We're not going to seek for something new or something higher. We've been working our way up the mountain. You should be in that place already. And if you've been slipping and sliding up the mountain, just try and find the footpath. It's usually easier to just stay on the path. So, all right. I've been together, led by the Holy Spirit. I've been led by the Holy Spirit to show you again, guide you again to the simplicity of following the track, the footpath. There's a simplicity. A highway is a complicated business. A footpath, not so much. Every now and then there's a little arrow or the footprint of a leopard or something to tell you you're still on the right path. Usually it's not that difficult to figure out that the path is the path. Normally there's a problem because someone before you walked where they were not supposed to walk, then some idiot followed them, and then I'm the 200th idiot that's following the other idiots. And that's why there's other paths where there wasn't supposed to be one. So that's how it works. Okay, so I've been trying to show you this. We follow a very simple strategy for life. Principles, don't think beyond what is written. Remain in humility. So you see, humility is not something you have to strive for, work for, or develop. We cultivate more of it, but humility is the thing that you receive when you receive His nature. Remember, I told you in the past that a very early revelation of mine was that although right after I came to faith, I hadn't read much of the Bible. So the whole book was unfamiliar. But He taught me in the beginning that when I received Him, I received the whole Word. And so the Word was in me. By reading and studying the Word, I was going to discover and decipher what was already in me. The same with the humility that we need so much and require. We receive that together with receiving Him. It's for us not to depart from humility or to allow ourselves to step into pride or vanity. And how do we do that? Stay away from thinking your own thoughts. Stay away from leaning on your own understanding. Stay away from thinking beyond what is written. The footpath is very simple. It's a simple affair. And that is why we worked our way through agreement. So when you go to a hiking trail, they tell you this is the starting point. So long it goes up the mountain. Not too much discussion is needed because there's a predetermined agreement. If you don't stick to the footpath and you get lost, that's on you. So the agreement thing is part of understanding the simplicity that we can create, not to get lost. We get lost in complications when we have to sort out when we didn't stick to agreement or we didn't know agreement. takes a lot of time. Agreement takes much less time than actually sorting out the lack of agreement. Or sorting out disagreement. Disagreement. I mean, we all understand the concept of disagreement. Disagreement is unpleasant, whilst agreement can be very pleasant. Now, then we looked at covenant, because covenant encompasses everything that we need for life. It's like the backpack that you're going to pack if you're going to go on a 7-day hike. If you didn't pack it, it's on you, and you're just going to have to live without it. God's covenant is His backpack that He packed for you, and you just stay on the footpath. It's pretty simple. So, we come back from our December rest period. That's not the end of the rest period. We bring that into our home. We bring that, that's why we go. We bring it back with us. We try and bring the breeze that's blowing through the trees into our bedroom. We go and rest not because we hate our life, because then we come back into our life with excitement and fervor. It's great when you go on a great holiday, and by the end of it, you're looking forward to go home. That's great. I love that that has happened and taken form in my life. I'm excited for home as well, because home is also great. And home is also good. And you can be anywhere in the world, the best place in the world. There's a point in time when you want to go to where you belong. And then we bring back some of the peace and tranquility, and we know now what we renew our understanding of peace and tranquility, of simplicity, and we bring that back as much as we can. That makes sense? So nothing ends, it's a continuum. But if you start your resting camp at the bottom of the mountain representing the ways of God, that ascending into the presence of God, the ascending into the manifest being and abiding with Him in a higher place. He will not come, He'll come and be with you in your low place in order to help you rise above it, or He'll come and He'll save you out of the valley, lead you out of it. But He's not going to come and abide with you in your low place. We giggle because we are used to Him not being like, but most people think, they invite Him, they beg Him, Lord, come and be with me. I refuse to climb out of the hole, but Lord, I need you to be in here with me. That's how most people approach it. I'm not going to change my circumstances, Lord, but I insist that you're going to come and live with me in these circumstances that I hate and cry about. So He'll rather reach down, offer you a helping hand to pull you out of it, and we go like, but you don't love me, you hate me because you don't want to be in my mess with me. And He's going like, well, no. So we understand that the mountain represents the place of ascending. Ascending to a place where things are more according to His existence, His kingdom, His will, His ways. And so the mountain represents that. How do we climb the mountain? One scripture at a time. So the place, the ledge on the mountain that we want to find before the resting time, where we are going to put a stake in the ground. We're going to we're going to secure ourselves to this place. I imagine the sword of the word, I've squarely put it into the place where I'm going to stay and rest. That place is Galatians 2 verse 20. It's no longer I who live. I died with him, crucified with him. And it's now him that lives in me. And the life that I live, the life that he lives, the life that I live, the life that he lives, we live to God. And we want to stand there, stay there, rest there, camp there. Because that's more or less the place that you start off with baptism. It's always the best place up the mountain to reach before you rest. Okay, so that's why we asked for Ascension to come back. Because we're not now climbing to reach to sort out everything in our life, to have every victory. We're saying we did the work, the Lord worked in our lives this year. We can count our blessings, we can count victories. Even if your victory is just greater understanding. Even if there's a lot more work to be done next year. So I look back over the year. Jean-Pierre Hanley, God did many things in your life. You guys are changed from 2023, aren't you? Different place, Hanley, nothing happened this year. The Lord did much. So there'll be more work next year, but the Lord did much. I remember, Jean-Pierre, when you were quite scared of life. It's looking up. So we learn, by going through some stuff, we learn that God is indeed faithful, that He will never leave nor forsake us. So it was scary a while back for both of you. You took it step by step, and I think better than ever. You guys are better than ever. Some scary moments there, Leon and Adna, over the last year or so. Some overcoming to do in the mind and the heart, but the Lord's faithful, and things worked out quickly. Yeah, so you guys landed in a much better place, Lizelle, Josh. So I remember you crying, feeling sorry for yourself. You're not going to do that anymore, eh? Okay. So that's what we do. We feel sorry for ourselves because we can only see the now. I love the Afrikaans word for God is the voorsiener. We see this part of the road, He knows exactly what lies ahead. And He removes the obstacles and He provides the breakthroughs. That's who He is. That's what He does in covenant. So sometimes we're still in the moment where we haven't seen the breakthrough, but take note that there's many around you that had to deal with stress and doubt and stuff, and then there's so many testimonies of things coming through. Over the course of the last 2-3 years, Nora's no longer on Skype. They've made it to Cape Town close to their kids, can be in church. Lana used to cry and pray that she wanted to be in church more. And it all came together, and now she's living here close to her kids. It's amazing. We finally got Manette married. I'm in a better place, Lord. And it couldn't have worked out better. I mean, we were praying for her to have a good husband, and then what a great gift to all of us. She brought Daniel, and it's part of our lives, and we are very grateful for him. What a delight! Can't believe that we used to live life without you. Crazy. It's like you've always just been. It's like we can't imagine not having you. So no, life. Man, it's not necessarily this year, but over the last 2 years, Charlene, there was a few moments where I was almost as stressed as you were. And we take the steps, the Lord shows us the way, and then breakthrough, and things get better. And so we've a lot of witness and testimony every step of the way. There was moments that Johannes caused me to wonder if the gospel is true. Johannes, I don't mean that, but yes, yeah. This last year was also breakthroughs, Johannes? By the sweat of your father's brow. No. Okay, so long story, not so short. We want to now understand. We want to move with understanding that we are going to rest and camp not somewhere in a valley or at the foot of the mountain. We find ourselves in a good place. And we'll climb the mountain next year. Because if you try and climb and go ahead now, you're going to move without the rest of the body, and it's never a great idea to do that. So enjoy the Lord for the Lord's sake. Enjoy the Lord for the Lord's sake. Recite covenant because it's your delight. And we're going into a season where let life just be life for a little while, as much as we can. I know, Veronique, that you don't not necessarily have that option. You're going to work hard, season time. But we roll with the seasons. I bet you, I'm willing to take you a bet. As you walk with us, you'll see everything change over time. It's just your first season. So many of us had to deal with that. But if you walk the steps, and especially the principles, is there anybody here that has not seen the principles work for you? These things look so simple. They are phenomenal. They're supernatural. Okay. Now, so we spoke a little bit about beginning and end on Wednesday, and we spoke about return, repeat, redo. Return, repeat, redo is probably the most underestimated of the principles. It's literally the basic premise, the basic design that God gives the Israelites for everything in life. It starts with the Passover, it starts with the Sabbath, it starts with the reading of the Torah. We see Abraham having sacrifices. He moves through the land in a circular route to the places where he had built his altars before. So in a year's time, Abraham, or maybe 2 years' time, Abraham's going to come to a place where a year ago or 2 years ago he built an altar. And he's going to remember and meditate again upon the things that God had instructed him. He's going to remember where he was as a man in the previous seasons of his life. Now he's going to reflect back on walking with God for another year or another 2 years. Same altar. He's going to bring a sacrifice again, but this time he's going to be more mature, more faithful, he's going to be wiser, and he would have experience of God's ways. And bringing the sacrifice on that altar is going to strengthen and cement in everything that the Lord has grown in him. The Lord has developed in him over another season and another year of walking through the land. Walking through the promises not yet fulfilled. Yet, in small ways, it's becoming more real, more tangible under his feet. Until finally some of the promises will be culminating in fulfillment, complete fulfillment. And so we see this principle all through the Bible. We see the principle in just a natural way of things. There's a season for sowing and there's a season for reaping. So return, repeat, redo is not something that we're trying to force into our lives as a new thing. It's us returning to the way that God established everything for us in the beginning. There's seasons. The rain falls in seasons. There's a reason why there has to be a dry season. Because if it keeps raining, we call it a flood. So there's a reason that there's a repetition. Everything in God's creation repeats itself over and over and over. There's day and there's night. There's dawn and there's dusk. And so we were created to have the rhythms of returning and repeating things. Every single day gives us the opportunity to not repeat the negative or the foolish or the unfaithful things. Every single day gives us the opportunity to not repeat that which is wicked and to cultivate that which is righteous. Every single day that is new, every year, every season gives us the opportunity to weed out and to get rid of that which is not true, fallacy, and misunderstanding, assumption and presumption. We can get rid of it piece by piece, bit by bit. And that's why there's a new day, repeating it, every day repeats. But we have the opportunity to repeat the good things, the principled things, the true things, and to stop repeating the other things. Does it make sense? So return, repeat, redo has two sides to it. The foolish person repeats the mistakes. That's not the good principle. That's one of the principled flaws in human nature. Establishing the opposite, the godly principle that he gave us in keeping the feasts. The feasts are connected to the harvests, to the planting, to the rain and the good seasons, the fruitful seasons and the hard work seasons. The feasts are connected to this. The ritual sacrifices are connected to the rhythms of everyday life throughout the year. God causes it to be pronounced. Through giving the feasts and the sacrifices, the traditions that he gives them, he puts exclamation marks on what would have been natural rhythms so that we can understand, we can take note. Every time we have to repeat and redo something, we want to do it better, with less wickedness, less foolishness, with more truth and with more wisdom, more circumspectly. For the believer that implements principles season after season and continues and progresses in these things, for that believer, they will not remain the same. And let me tell you the secret to life. If you don't remain the same, your life will not remain the same. If you remain the same, your life will not change. That is why people out in the world can only see their lives go backward because they are going backward, or at the very best they can see their lives remain the same because they're fighting so hard to remain who they are. Not so for us, not so for the redeemed, the renewed in Messiah, because we're having our minds renewed and we are renewed day by day, going from glory to glory. And so we change, and with it our lives change for the better. Right, so the principle of beginning and end, we did speak about it, it's very familiar to us. But as we are establishing our position in good standing with Yahweh and with each other, as we are establishing, we're using the last bit of time before we break for our holidays, we're using the last bit of time to reestablish with each other our good standing. We might have made mistakes, but we didn't fall away. We might have made mistakes, but we didn't give up. We didn't draw back. The Bible calls it drawing back. And fear and anxiety and drawing back is a sign of perdition. We didn't. So we reaffirming our place of good standing with the Lord and with each other. And that is why the last bit of work for this year, we are focusing again on the simplest but the most profound things that we call principles. Like Nadia said on Wednesday, and it's something she has said in the past often, the principle of beginning and end is to her a personal aspect of the Lord himself, because it is. The principle is based on the fact that the Lord Yahweh and Yahushua specifically, he identifies himself as the beginning and the end. He introduces himself to us as the beginning and the end. Now imagine if Hanley and Jean-Pierre can have a baby soon, and I'm aware that there's other couples that are going to have babies soon. We can have our whole choir in the back there. And Oli is already practicing. He's going to be leading them in loudness. Okay, but sorry, I'm interrupting myself. I just thought, it'd be great if there's like more people in the back doing this than people seated. Let's be fruitful. Okay. So the principle of beginning and end is based. We acquired it. We perceived it. We were wise enough to respond to something that is personal to Yahushua, personal to the Father. He says, I am the beginning and the end. And so this principle is a big one, a big principle. We can put some scriptures on. Can you manage? So you can probably pick up that we're done with the complicated teachings. We want to simplify things for ourselves. Simplify things. I stand on what I have said many millions of times. The answer in every situation is try and identify how you can simplify the situation. Before you try and figure out what the answer is, try and figure out how can I simplify things. And it'll be much easier to find the answer. I also can guarantee you, if you don't want a solution, then complicate it. If you don't want to find yourself out of a situation, complicate it for yourself. Bring extra elements and factors into your argument. By all means, if you do not want to resolve a matter, see how you can complicate a matter, and it will not be resolved. A wise person will set out immediately when faced with a challenge to find how the situation could possibly be simplified. Okay. If you ever have to look for a needle in a haystack, Google a picture of a needle first. Make sure you know what it looks like. All right. Revelation chapter 22, verse 12 to 13. This is one we all know, but one we should refresh on all the time and look at as often as possible. Such a simple truth. Verse 13, the Lord says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. At least 80% of everything that we teach, 80%, if not 100% of our building blocks, I would say all of our principles, all the work that we've done over the last many years in formulating and teaching and understanding the word, all of it is based on this. We have set out to find in the word why he is the first and the last, and we have successfully proven that the word actually endeavors to let us know how he is the first and last and that he is the first and the last. Now, what is he saying? Let's go to that first link, the Alpha and the Omega. Now, some of you know this, we've taught on this before, we are now reminding ourselves. So, we do a lot of work, we go through discipling, we implement principles. Why? Because Messiah likeness is the goal of our faith. What does Messiah likeness mean? We look at him and then we try and copy what he does. We listen to what he says, we try and start to think and speak in the same way. The principle of beginning and end, basically on that. How will we become like him in mind and in action, in word, in spirit and in heart? How will we become like him if we do not get rid of everything that is not like him? So the letter Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, meaning mark, sign, omen, or seal. It is the symbol of truth, perfection, and completion. I want us to look at that specific meaning of it, the completion. Because when he says he's the beginning and the end, this is what he was referring to actually. He was saying, I am the Aleph, Tav. He was saying literally, I am the first letter of the written word, the alphabet. I am the second letter. What is he saying? He says that he as the Lord, remember he's now the Son of God, come in the flesh. He says that every true word spoken, I am. Every truth in existence I am, and it comes from me. Every letter from the first to the last. He claims language itself as being part of his person. He claims the written form of language as his and coming from him. We now come to the conclusion that he clearly says that from the first letter of the alphabet to the last, it's him. Comes from him, belongs to him, it's under his dominion and his authority. And he placed the ability for thinking in words, in pictures, in concepts, he placed that in us. It's part of the godly nature. So when you think, the faculty of thinking, constructing something sensible, should be adherent, listen carefully, it should be adherent to his person, because he says, I am the Aleph Tav. When we start realizing that your faculty of thinking, of constructing reasonable thought, when you construct, when you think, you are constructing something concrete within yourself, that should be adherent to his person. He made it very clear. Aleph Tav belongs to him, should be in submission to him. It is personified by him. And he placed that in us. Further and even greater than us being able to construct a sensible and organized thought pattern is that we can also communicate it on the outside. We can speak it, we can hear and understand it, we can even create forms with tools that represent, the written language now represents that which once originated in our thoughts, in our mind. It is what is communicated from one person to another. Communication, the spoken language, is the very nature of human connection. Without communication, there can be no understanding, no cooperation, no agreement. Without communication, there can be no form, no construct, no order. It is the very bond, the very connection between us. You might say it is the thing that's going to bind together, knit together the members of one body. We see it in the family unit. It is language that is going to enable a family unit, parents and children, to be coherent in their action and their lifestyle. So the very root of what should be happening in our minds, in our heart, in our thought life, goes back to the scripture that says he is the Aleph and the Tav, and every other letter in between. Take away the alphabet and you have nothing. All you have is what exists in your head as sounds. But to manifest it in concrete form, we had to have this. And he says he is that. Now, the embedded meaning of that last letter of the Hebrew alphabet means completion. It represents completion. It represents the restoration, the tikkun of all of existence. It is a return to the essence and purpose of one's life. It represents completion before beginning again with the original oneness of the Aleph. I love this article because the guy just touches on some of the deepest, most important aspects of the Word of God. Ja, nog nie aangaan, hè? Okay. The oneness of the Aleph. So the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, it represents Yahweh himself, the head. So it's the sign of the ox, or oxen. It is the one that goes before. So if you had yoked your oxen together, in order to what? In order to plow, to prepare the ground, to sow the seed. The one that is the strongest, the most capable, is the ox that is going to lead the rest of that which is yoked. So Yahweh is identified in the Hebrew pictograph language as the ox head. It's their representative of might and strength. In the Hebrew world, they had not yet seen elephants. The strongest thing they know is an ox. A wild animal like a lion doesn't represent that strength, because the strength of the ox is that it is measured, disciplined, functional. It can perform the task with its strength. Whereas for them, wild beasts were roaming around without sense or order. That's why the ox is the symbol of power, strength, and might. Right. So the oneness of the Aleph there is very significant. The moment that you come to the end of the alphabet, in the Hebrew mindset, you begin again. That's how alphabet works. It's never concluded, never finished, yet it has a completion. Has a completion. Think about language, especially the English language. You have a determined number of letters that gives us the ability to communicate everything. It's phenomenal. My brain cannot even understand the existence of such a thing. Think about it. Every concept and idea that you could wish to communicate is represented by a small number of letters. And we have the ability to put them together, construct. And it's amazing. It becomes infinite. Okay, now let's go to the second paragraph. So that's just what it, okay, what a letter looks like. Some sources say that that letter also represents a shelter or abode, which would make absolute sense, that it begins with Yahweh and it culminates in completion with New Jerusalem. The Tav shows us that the end was set from the beginning, as Tav is the final letter of Bereshit, in the beginning. The first word of the Torah, Bible. It is the idea that the Creator set in motion all of existence in order to reach a final state of perfection, the fulfillment of all of creation. It is also the completion of truth, emet. Okay? Ik kan aanbeweeg. However, as soon as the Taf is reached, we begin again immediately by going back to the Aleph, the one source of everything. The end is never really the end, but the beginning of something new. Now, it's very rare that I do research and find a resource where I go, it's been so perfectly written that I'm not going to fiddle with it, because I can't do better than this guy did. What a beautiful description of the mindset, the attitude behind the Aleph bet. To us in English, our alphabet is just an alphabet. To them, it was something far more. To them, there's a message about Yahweh himself embedded in the alphabet. And it becomes a mindset, it becomes a philosophy, it becomes a discipline, it becomes something that is embedded in the Jewish mind, The moment we reach completion, it becomes the beginning of something new. Isn't it? Great is the moment when you bring in the harvest. And you can have the feast and celebrate a successful harvest, evidence for the Hebrew mind that Yahweh has indeed blessed them and kept them. But the moment the harvest has been brought in, the next season already starts. What a beautiful attitude towards things. In our Western mind, we somehow think that we are finishing stuff. We're always trying to finish stuff. It brings great relief when you learn to go back to the Hebraic mind, that as you finish anything, you have already started approaching the beginning of something new. Isn't it beautiful? So this is so beautifully embedded in Yahweh and especially in Yahushua. It says, in the beginning, God created. And as He created through His Son, and from His Son, it represents the cross outside of time. And the cross outside of time represents the end. Simply, the end. The end of all created worlds. So the cross enables the beginning because the Son has to be perfected. Because the Son is perfected, the created world has to end. How beautiful is it? Okay. The beginning and the end. Isaiah chapter... Oh, there's another resource, right? Sorry. I must skip my own process here. Okay. This is just to show you how it's written. Don't have to really read the rest of what's up there, the description. So in the pictograph language, remember they go from the right to the left. So the Aleph is the ox head. The Tav originally looked like a cross or a sign or a symbol. And so the cross becomes the end of all things. And that's the modern version of the same. Right. Go to the next. Now, when we talk about the beginning and end, the order of things, it is very important for us to now identify this, the connection between those two principles. We tried on Wednesday to open up the conversation regarding this. So beginning and end is for us a principle that we start to teach our mind, our way of thinking, our way of acting, according to this principle of beginning and end. Why? Because God calls from the beginning, He says what the end will be. When He begins, He has already determined and decided what the end will be. So we teach ourselves according to what we see Him do, according to who He says He is. We start to teach ourselves a mindset to be like Him, to think like Him and to act like Him. So we start teaching ourselves that as I formulate, as I form thought patterns, I already look towards what is the end, what's the purpose, what's the outcome. If I'm going to speak, I should be aware of the outcome. What is my intention? What's the intended outcome come when I start? I think that is probably one of the most profound pieces of advice to the human being, to the human race. The big problem with the humans is that we oftentimes start things and we're not sure what the end is going to be. And oftentimes we know the end is negative, but we hope it won't be. And then we start anyway. Oftentimes we start without the wisdom to determine, should we have started at all? But if we first have a mindset of considering the end of things, considering the consequence, considering what this will become if I think this. If I allow this thought pattern, what will it become in me? If I allow this emotional response, what will it become in me? If I allow this to come out of my mouth, what will it become around me, and in my world, in my relationships? That's what the principle of beginning and end entails. It is a mindfulness, a wise disposition of always being mindful of the end first. It becomes extremely important in those moments when we're going to do nothing. This principle becomes extremely important in the moment when we would have done nothing and we should have done something. Where we should have responded, and if we didn't have the awareness of outcome, if we're not mindful of outcome, I believe that we probably on average, for the average person, we miss a good 80% of opportunities given to us by God by simply not thinking, simply not responding, simply not being present. Or we kind of realize something is happening, but we haven't learned to look for outcome, to look for results, look for potential. Because outcome, the end of a thing is the potential of the thing. So beginning and end starts in very small ways as discipline. But beginning and the end of things become Him. He is able to put the right steps in place because He has decided on the ultimate outcome. Why? Because He's aware of the potential of things. Okay. So Isaiah, okay, we'll get back to this one. First go to Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10. So we are going to go camp over the December holiday. It's the cheapest way to do things, my favorite way of resting. What's the outcome I want? You know how much planning goes into driving far away from home and going to camp? A lot of planning goes into it. Advanced planning. We started planning this holiday last year, September. So we made our first bookings. We booked our first camping spot last year, September. Why? Because I don't want to pitch up and have a spot in the sun, because all the other good spots are taken. Why? Because of the outcome. What's the outcome I want? I want to be happy. What else? I want to be happy. Comfortable, with as little strain as possible. I want to think of nothing. Not even you guys. When I say nothing, I mean I want to think of lamb chops and boerewors. I can spend half an hour's worth of thought input into how the fire is going to work this time. Buying the wood, selecting the right wood, packing the wood, preparing to pack the wood, smelling the wood. Make sure that when you light the fire, when you buy wood up in KZN, you make sure that nothing is going to interrupt the moment when you light the fire. Because the smell of the wood burning there is one of life's great delights. Then you want to make sure that nothing is going to interrupt your sitting by the fire. A lot of planning has gone into making that moment possible. Why am I saying this? Being aware of the outcome that you want. For me, I've prepared, and I'm going to push over the next 2 weeks to make sure that all the other things that could cause me trouble, I want to make sure I've taken care of it. Why? Because I know what the outcome is that I want from the December holiday. One of the reasons things go wrong is because we don't decide on the outcome of things early on. Yes, it's going to take more work if you want the outcome. Doesn't make any sense. Preparation, planning, because you know what the outcome should be. This sounds like something silly I'm saying, but it turns out to be extremely profound. So, God says, Yahweh, I am Yahweh, and there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Declaring the end from the beginning. So he declares about himself, part of his might, part of his character. The reason why he can declare himself to be of upstanding character, a certain type of person. He identifies himself as a certain type. There can be a certain expectation on him. He himself sets a certain expectation on himself. Says, when I start, I can tell you exactly what the end is going to be. Believers, the moment that this piece of information about his character, about his person, becomes real to you, the moment that this revelation of his person, his character, how he sees himself, the thing that he communicates about himself, his identity, his sense of being, his sense of himself that he communicates to us, the moment that this part of him communicating himself to us becomes real to you, everything has the possibility of changing radically. All you have to do is identify that he is in something in the beginning. Or seek those things in your life where he is going to be in it. Or you can be in it together with him. Because then you know the end is determined, guaranteed, predetermined, decided on, and he doesn't fail. Does it make sense? If you start praying about a thing, and you have made sure that you can pray about this, that you're praying according to the will of the Spirit in line with the Word, once you have started, there is no option for another outcome. But He's an orderly God. Why is it necessary that we understand the order and the importance of orderly behavior? Why is it so important that we grasp the importance of order? Because if He calls the end from the beginning, He is by necessity going to have to follow a specific orderly process to make sure that he doesn't see another outcome in the end. We copy that. We go, if it's like he does things, then I'm going to teach myself to have the same mindset, the same attitude towards things. Order is the only way for that to be true. Order and faithfulness to the order is the only way that this part of God's character can remain true. When he calls the beginning and he says what the end would be, the outcome would be, when he starts, that mindset in us forces us to look for the orderly way. Otherwise, we will not achieve the outcome. Does it make sense? Okay. So we look at the order in God's character, the sense of orderly behavior, and the way that he communicates it as a high principle, a high value. He communicates this throughout the word. And there's no better example as more than 2 million Israelites having to be brought through the wilderness. How do you lead 2 million people through the wilderness? By establishing order, by making sure where the beginning and the end of things is, communicating it, enforcing it, and leading by example. So, we go to the book of Numbers, chapter 9, verse 15 to 23. Numbers chapter 9, verse 15 to 23. I'm reading. Now, on the day that the tabernacle was raised up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony. From evening until morning, it was above the tabernacle like the appearance of fire. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, after that the children of Israel would journey, and in the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. At the command of the Lord, the children of Israel would journey, and at the command of the Lord they would camp. As long as the cloud stayed above the tabernacle, they remained encamped. Even when the cloud continued long, more days above the tabernacle, the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and did not journey. So it was when the cloud was above the tabernacle a few days, according to the command of the Lord they would remain encamped, and according to the command of the Lord they would journey. So it was when the cloud remained only from evening until morning. When the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they would journey, whether by day or by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up, they would journey. Whether it was 2 days, a month, or a year that the cloud remained above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. But when it was taken up, they would journey. At the command of the Lord, they remained encamped, and at the command of the Lord they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord at the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. Wow! Talk about emphasizing something. See, when you read through the Old Testament, oftentimes seemingly important events are mentioned in 2 sentences. Then you get to something like this, and the author emphasizes it, repeats it. They make sure that the importance of what they are saying is understood. This long paragraph basically says, when the cloud remained, they had to camp, and they only were allowed to move when the cloud moved. What is he saying? He says, even if it happened that the cloud stopped, they had to set up their camps, pitch their tents, unpack the crates with their food, put up the braai, put out the camping chairs and the camping table, everything. Put the gazebos up, all of that. And then it could happen that the next morning the cloud moved. Then you had to pack everything up and move. Other times it would frustrate them because the cloud could stay in one place for a month. But they obeyed. The order of God's leading. Now the next thing that we need to understand in the order of things is the way that He caused them to camp in specific ways, pack up and unpack in specific ways. So even if all of a sudden they had to move, they did not break the order that God had set for them. Let's go to Numbers chapter 2. Numbers chapter 2, verse 1 to 34. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, every one of the children of Israel shall camp by his own standard, beside the emblems of his father's house. They shall camp some distance from the tabernacle of meeting. On the east side, towards the rising of the sun, those of the standard of the forces with Judah shall camp according to their armies. Go to verse 5. Those who camp next to them shall be the tribe of Issachar and Nathanael, the son of Zoar. Verse 7. Then comes the tribe of Zebulun, and Eliab the son of Helon shall be the leader of the children of Zebulun. Verse 10. On the south side shall be the standard of the forces with Reuben according to their armies. Verse 12. Those who camp next to him shall be the tribe of Simeon. Verse 14. Then comes the tribe of Gad. Go to verse 16. All who were numbered according to their armies of the forces of Reuben, 150, 1,450. They shall be the second to break camp. You can go home and, if you please, go read through the whole chapter 2. And you see that Yahweh, from His side, takes the time. He instructs them who sets camp where and who sets up camp first. The others have to wait until they're done. Then they set their camp. And when they break up, you wait. When the first lot has broken up camp, then you can start, you break up camp if you're second. Then the third tribe breaks up their camp. Orderly. Now you can put back that picture of the order in which they did things. So from the time, think about this, from the time the tabernacle was built, for 40 years until the time that the Israelites could cross into the promised land, being the second generation that was old enough to cross over. Every time they camped, they did it exactly in this way. Over and over and over again. In the north, those who have been assigned to the north. In the east, those who have been assigned there. South and west, those who have been assigned. Dan was the last tribe instructed to break camp. So when everybody had moved out, Dan would break up camp and they would see if anybody forgot something or left something. They would pick it up and return it to the others. Dan became the representative of the picture of humility and patience. The Bible says he who is last will be first, and he who is first will be last. We have a principle of beginning and end. And then we have a principle of return, repeat, redo. Return, repeat, redo. Why do we have such a principle? As modern thinkers, we are looking to become wise in God's ways, and the wisdom of God is very clearly given to us in these portions of Scripture that has been all but forgotten and misunderstood. Simple Chinese wisdom that goes with this principle. If it worked, do it again. If it didn't, don't repeat. If it worked, do it again. Do it again, and do it better next time, but do it again. We smile when we hear how simple it is. You would think that humans would have learned this by now. We have a tendency to get it exactly right and then do it differently next time. We have a tendency. In church, if you came through baptism water, you had a good start. Anyone that successfully came through the baptism water has success under their belt. They know grace, they have stepped into grace. Let me tell you something. There's no grace separate from the discipline of God. There's no grace separate from the person of God. And His person is the beginning and the end. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1. See, we oftentimes give up too soon. It took a certain amount of awakening for you to be saved, didn't it? You had to wake up. Why not make sure that we stay awake? It worked for salvation's sake. When a person comes to the place where they are going to get baptized, there's real repentance. Something was important enough to pay attention. So what's the simple answer? It's good to continue to pay a high level of attention. Right? When you were baptized by us, did we allow you to just do your own thing? Someone say, I want to be baptized in the ocean. I say, no. We do baptism in a certain way. I don't have a lot of time. Can I have a 20-minute baptism? No, it will take 2 to 3 hours. So we start off like this. Why would we change that at all in the future? We'll never change that. We start off in a certain way. We continue in an orderly way. If we implement it in our personal lives, we should have the same outcome all the time. You had to wake up, stay awake. You had to pitch up, keep pitching up. Right? You had to wrestle through the doubt, unbelief, and all the other physical things. So why don't we know that we're going to have to continue doing that? And every time we do it, we'll have a good outcome, more awakening. Okay, now, Ephesians chapter 5 says this, therefore be imitators of God as dear children. So the principle of beginning and end and repeat, return, repeat, redo, this is how, one of the ways we respond to become imitators of God. He says, I'm the beginning and the end. I'm going to imitate that. I am the beginning and the end. I'm going to work on beginning and end. Yes. Okay, guys, I'm hoping this is making sense. Then, furthermore, he says, and walk in love as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us, an offering and sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma. Verse 8. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. Finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. Finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Verse 15, this is the main point. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. This has been from the start of this ministry, every day, ever since till now, it's been one of our anchor ideas in how to serve the Lord. Walk circumspectly. It says the days are evil. Why do we wake up and expect anything different? How will the day not be evil for you? What's going to cause it? You be the light that causes the darkness in the day to go. You. How are you going to do that? Conforming yourself to the Lord, His image and His ways. Bringing order and maintaining order with a very clear concept of knowing the end result, what you expect and what you want. If you want the wrong thing, and you start off a process of attaining the wrong thing, why would you expect happiness and reward and joy and rest and peace? If you want what is godly as an outcome, and you set your beginning and your process on the godly outcome, why would you expect anything other than goodness and rest and peace and joy and soundness? Does it make sense? Okay, so I have labored to make sure that in this season we have again confirmed with each other that we have in this church an agreement that there's a principle called beginning and end, and there's a principle of return, repeat, redo. There's a strong agreement in this church that we live by this. We practice it, we cultivate it, and there is no veering off this agreement. A person within this congregation, in this circle of believers, that do not exhibit a devotion to principles and implementation of principles will be helped, then will be corrected, then will be rebuked. Because we have agreement on these things. Principles are not a suggestion. In this church, principles are based on God's example, God's person and His word, and therefore we expect all people to implement and to cultivate these principles devotedly, to avoid veering away from these principles. Because when a person does, it causes them to become less than trustworthy. And when we have a situation in the body where we can't trust each other, it means we can't fellowship with each other. We can't fellowship with each other, we can't pray with each other. If we can't pray with each other, we cannot share our lives with each other, and the person will become isolated. Principles are the main principal way of becoming one with the rest of the body. So please don't underestimate the beginning and the end principle and the return, repeat, redo. We try and avoid not repeating the negative things, and we try and learn to repeat the positive, fruitful things. We do that by beginning and end. The two is one. Do you see that? Two principles, the one leads to the other. Where's Johannes? As a closing, Johannes, can you come to the front, please? For those who have forgotten what the scripture means, walk circumspectly. How do you walk circumspectly? Now you must look where you're going. So now I want you to walk to me, but you're not allowed to use steps that follow one on the other. You have to skip steps. So see, walking is simple. You put one foot in front of the other one and you take steps if you want to get somewhere. If you take steps in various directions, it complicates the process. Am I right? If you don't watch where you're going, it complicates the situation. Okay, so walk circumspectly is a profound truth that is life-changing. Be aware what the next step is going to be. Then extrapolate. Use existing data and experience to determine if the next step is going to get you where you want to go to. Walk circumspectly is as simple as that. Pay attention while you're walking, don't just walk. Plan your steps ahead, one step at a time. How do you know you're doing well? Check if the previous step was sound. If you started slipping and sliding, or you got stuck in the mud, the previous step is going to tell you whether or not you should take the next step in the same direction. If the previous step, the one you just took, caused you hassle or a lack of progression, stop and think twice if you should take the next step in the same direction. There's always time to stop if we take note of what the previous step did, what it meant, where it took us, what was the outcome. That's what walking circumspectly means. So you watch, you pay attention. Have you ever seen in movies, old movies loved quicksand. They don't do that anymore, but in old movies there was quicksand. Love it. So the person starts sinking and then what? He tries to take another step. They don't try and go back, they go like, and then they go in. Okay? So the first time, have you ever stepped into mud? That's when you should backtrack immediately. What do? You go like, well, maybe there's some solid ground ahead of me. It happens like that all the time. Thank you, Johannes. So I want to leave you with that. Okay, so we're refreshing some basic things. Over a period of a month, you're not going to see each other unless the ones that staying behind are going to be around. The ones that stay behind, if you're going to hang out, you need to stick to the principles very carefully. But who are you most likely going to see? All the family members that are not in this church. The ones that don't walk according to principles, that don't know what circumspectly is, beginning and end doesn't exist. And they're going to repeat and redo everything that used to cause all the conflict previous years over the Christmas time. Can I guarantee you they're going to try do it exactly the same way again and expect a different outcome. Okay. So, what you guys need to do is do it differently. I'm starting to prepare us for that, and now you can go with a blessing and in peace. and go and enjoy the Sunday. Thank you for coming. Bye bye to everybody. Bye bye.